As I mentioned earlier, my name is Alex Stinson. I'm one of the owners of PROergonomics, and thank you for joining me today. I know things are still kind of on the odd side of normal, and hopefully some of you either never really deviated from normal or are getting back into more of a normal routine. I am, however, still working from home, so I will put a disclaimer there that although I've had serious conversations with both my dog and my two children, there is a small chance that you may hear them in the background at some point, and I do apologize for that, but they have been put on warning. So for those of you that are new to PROergonomics, we are an ergonomics consulting and training firm that specializes in high-end ergonomic assessments, training, design, and overall just kind of looking at how we can optimize work so that you don't have the injuries, so that you're able to be more productive, and at the end of the day, your staff is going to be more comfortable and all of the wonderful things that come with that. So today we are here to discuss tech neck or text neck, whichever you are, is your preference. It's becoming a thing. It's becoming quite the thing. And what we are finding, and we actually had someone actually text us or message us beforehand and ask us if we were going to discuss this, and absolutely. The question is, the jobs we have don't necessarily have device or phone or kind of tech use in them, but the use at home and on the personal side is so high that we are now being saddled with basically the injury that is resulting from that. And how do we deal with that? And I will confess right now, I am an avid reader to the point where if I can get, hours upon hours in, I will sit in front of my device and read. It's not been uncommon for it to be upwards of 8 hours. That being said, that's going into the early hours of the morning. But that being also said, it's something that never ever was an issue, whether it was because I was younger or whether it was because I was using books. But neck problems never became a conversation. And my whole family's big readers, and I've never heard my parents talk about, when they were reading, having neck issues when they were my age. So it leads us down this trail that there is definitely something about using our devices that is adding to the strain. And when we look at the biomechanics of that, it does make sense. So first off, I am going to say I am not a doctor. I am not a physiotherapist or a chiropractor, but I am an ergonomist, and we do study, the postures of the body and the tasks that we're doing. We try and align them so that the body is being given the best opportunity, not only for healing, but for preventing injuries in the first place. And that's really kind of what we're going to be talking about today. So we're kind of going to go over the definition, some signs and symptoms, the device use statistics, say that 3 times fast, here in Canada, the impact on the work that we're doing in the workplace, solutions, and kind of some of our workplace return to work strategies, and how we're able to deal with these, specifically when technically they're non-occupational, we're not causing them, but how do we stop people from using their devices? So tech neck, essentially, it is a strain that can affect the neck, the upper back, kind of across the shoulder blades, and into the upper shoulders, the deltoids, and it is caused from this forward kind of tilt and almost crane position that we hold. And it's not holding it for a few seconds that's going to cause the problem. It's the fact that we are doing this for hours within our day. And so that static head posture is causing forces and is causing misalignment, and that is leading to our chronic discomfort. So you can see here on the right, this gentleman, this is our posture that we should have, but this is the posture we do have. And it's a good kind of self-assessment, and we'll be talking about that a little bit later. But, although it is our devices that is kind of what we're focusing on today, it is things like how are we set up in the computer workstation, kind of at home or in our office, because that whole neck posture, that whole craning, neck forward, it also comes in when you are using your monitor too far away. It comes in when you're using paperwork. So there's a lot of things that kind of create and mimic those same postures that our devices are. One thing I will say, because tech neck is, as I said, because of my many hours, is something I have struggled with kind of off and on. And the biggest thing I would say is the due diligence of it. I have to be perfect with my neck at this point, because otherwise the re-injury or the reoccurrence of discomfort is very, very quick. So it's not like, oh, it's okay, I can read, for a few hours this night. No, by the next morning I will have a flare up, and it is always very evident when I'm not behaving when it comes to my devices and how I'm using them, as well as my computer workstation setup. So obviously neck pain becomes a huge kind of symptom. That is the predominant one, but we'll also start to see neck or headaches, migraines, and because of the postures of the necks we're holding, it often feels like, a nerve is being pinched and it's shooting. Like it's a very, very defined line that you can follow, kind of to follow that headache. It's very, very sharp. It's very painful. Could lead to migraines. When we're looking at kind of how we adjust our postures, if we're trying to improve our neck, the common thing people do is raise their shoulders. So we will see a compensation happening between neck and shoulder. And once you bring that kind of shoulder, the back soreness is obviously going to be there. If you're starting to get knots, they can sit on some of the nerve endings and blood supply that are kind of going through from the spinal column down your arms. So we will often then see numbness and tingling in the hands. When we're looking at all of this, really, this whole kind of forward neck posture is the big hitter. So when we look at how we got here, like most people, I understand, are not reading 8 hours at a time on their Kindle or whatever device they're using. Most of us are, social media users and texters, and we're just trying to communicate with our friends. And right now, we're seeing a lot more activity in this nature because we're isolated from those we love. So we're trying to reach out for them. I can't tell you how many apps my family has got me to download, all in the name of FaceTiming. Like I've got Marco Polo, I've got House Party, like it's ridiculous. But they're all so that we can have kind of one-on-one time with the various devices that our family members have, and we can play games and we can do things, but that can lead to, again, hours of phone or device time that we're using. And although I may start off good, once we get into, after 30 minutes, I guarantee you my neck posture is being compromised if I've not set myself up properly. And that's a key point, if I've not set myself up properly, because we're going to come back to that. So how we got here, these are all obviously pre-COVID stats. I would assume that maybe these are actually really higher now, at least since March. So 86% of Canadians have smartphones. When using their smartphones, we typically will see a 45 degrees of flexion at the neck, and we're using them for 3 to 4 hours a day for non-voice activities. So we're not talking about phone calls, we're not talking about things that we're actually talking. We're talking the social media, we're talking the reading, we're talking the texting, gaming, whatever we have going on, but 3 to 4 hours a day. So when you consider some of the jobs that you have for your employees, how many of the jobs that you have also require that forward, 20 to 45 degrees of neck flexion to do their job? Now we're getting some heavy hitting hours in that are just, they're tipping the scales. Our body can't sustain them. So handheld devices combined with our computer activities and that just static posturing of the head is leading to these increases of this tech neck or text neck or whichever you're wanting to use. So as we said, the strain at the muscles because and we'll get into some of the forces in a second, because the forces that are generated from actually just holding your head forward, and that's just tilting forward. So just kind of as an exercise, as you're sitting here listening to me, there's two kind of postures that we adopt. There's the, if you're sitting, kind of work at getting yourself aligned and you're kind of neck straight, and then just glance down. So this is actually, when I say 45 degrees, this is with the assumption that everything else is in alignment, that back is straight, and I've just got this forward, as I said, 20 to 45, 50 degree angle at my neck. And this is the posture that we will hold initially. Okay, we may do slightly better than that. We may actually hold our phone up. Again, we'll activate the shoulder muscles, bringing the phone up so our neck is completely neutral. But over time, the muscles in the shoulder will fatigue, the phone will start to drop, the head is going to follow. And that is kind of our best case scenario. What we will see, so as you take this posture, now round out your shoulders and then move your chin out forward. We kind of call this the turtle. I call it the turtle. I don't know if my coworkers call it the turtle. I call it the turtle. So it kind of starts to have your neck kind of crane forward. And this is where we're starting to see kind of strain happening in the vertebrae. So we have the muscles in the neck that are being strained just from acting as a counterbalance to the head. We have the shoulders being strained because they are not necessarily holding a lot of weight, but they are being statically used. I reference this as my Survivor analogy. The Survivor show where they used to have to hold a rope above their head, and that was all they had to do. It wasn't hugely physical, but it was all based on that isometric holding a body posture, which stops blood flow. It decreases the nutrients we're bringing into the muscle to allow it to do work. And at the end of the day, really, we can't withstand it for very long. So it's kind of my survivor challenge. So as we raise our arms up, to whether it be to compensate for the neck or even just to see or gain or, text, then that's going to put the stress on our neck. What we're also starting to see is what I will often do, for good or for bad, I'm not quite sure yet, but so that I don't fatigue the shoulders, because at this point, when I have a flare up, it's not just my neck. It goes down my upper back and then across my shoulders. So what I will do is I will try to take the static out of my shoulders and I will rest on a surface so that I'm able to hold my phone at eye height. And this is fine. But again, if I get into, and I'm sure we've all been there, the text that you send, to say I'll be home at whatever, and next thing you know, your daughter's, you're 20 minutes in, and you've been texting the whole time, having a whole conversation rather than just talking to each other. Maybe I'm the only one who does that, but it happens all the time to me. Anyways, now I have a contact stress. So my elbow is touching down onto our hard surface. The nerves and, again, the blood vessels that are crossing that joint are being pinched. And now I may start to see that that's causing increased postures in my elbow joints, as well as that contact stress. As soon as I get into that turtle position, now we're impacting the vertebrae. And once we hit the vertebrae, we're going to impact the discs. So as I said, going back to why that head posture is such a problem. So many of us don't know this, but our head is approximately 10% of our body weight. So for, 100 or so pound person, we're looking at a head weight of around 10 to 12 pounds. And that's when it's just sitting nicely at a neutral posture on top of our shoulders. So at 0 degrees, we've got that 12-pound head weight. Now, as soon as then we start to tip that head forward and we start having that counterbalance action happening, you can start to see in this slide how drastically the force required to sustain that goes up. So when we get into, and again, as fatigue happens, the posture is actually going to get worse, not better. You're actually going to drop your head down further rather than holding it up, because that 45 degrees is actually kind of a limbo state and it's hard to do. But at 60 degrees, when you are like right in there and you've been Facebooking or Instagramming, I don't know what people are doing on their phone, but we're looking at 60 pounds. Because you imagine adding 60 pounds of essential, weight or force to our body just because of the postures that we are doing. So this is really the pivotal point on why we're getting such kind of severe discomfort, because the weight is severe. What we're looking at we're not talking about 1 or 2 pounds. We're not even talking about the 10 pounds that our head weighs. We're going into over 60 pounds, which is, for some people, that's 50% of our body weight. So, it becomes something that we need to kind of look at in terms of if we have that head flexion, anything going to be to 40 degrees, we have the compressive forces in the spine at 1.6 times the weight of the head, and our shear forces could be up to 4 times that. So, as I said, we're starting to see not just the tension in the muscles, but we're actually starting to see cervical disc herniations kind of in our upper neck, which isn't common. Usually those are traumatic type injuries. They're not, musculoskeletal in nature. Usually if we're going to see musculoskeletals, we often will see them in the lumbar region of our body. We're not often seeing them in the neck. But now, as we've brought kind of these new technologies into play, we now have these herniations happening further up the spine. So this has been a thing, this slide right here. So I don't want to spend a ton of time because it's actually very, very controversial, but I know from being out and talking to people that it is something that seems to be coming up more and more, and people are asking me about, the horn or the growth that's happening at the base of our skulls. I've heard it's, an evolutionary marvel, and people kind of are very interested and, just intrigued and by this kind of phenomenon. So what we have shown was there was a research study showing that age groups between the age of 18 to 30 were showing in this sample size, and it was one study, that we were showing this, very small 15 to 30 millimeter protuberance or calcification or growth at the base of our skull. And it then got switched, I believe it was in the Washington Post, to an article that was saying that the use of our devices was directly causing this change in our anatomy. And they actually ended up having to go back and recant that story. During this study where they found this prominence, there was no test subjects around device use. So it's not like we had the group of people that were showing this growth were given devices to use, and those that, were a control group had never used a device at all. There was really nothing in the study to actually point to the fact that device use was the direct cause or correlation to this phenomenon. However, that being said, the biomechanics, what could cause this are prolonged, static, high compressive, high shear forces at the neck. So the newspaper made this leap and said, okay, well, if this is what they're saying is causing this anomaly, and these are the postures that we're using for devices, then devices must be causing the anomaly. And so they had to recant that. And just to give you some perspective, the original post was, I believe, shared over 100,000 times, and the recant was shared 660 times. Something like those. Those numbers may not be precise, but given that is the general kind of number difference that we are looking at. So as I said, it's not to say that the original article was horribly flawed or wrong. They made a hypothesis and a correlation, but the original study that was looking at these prominences never tied this issue to phone use. But it is interesting, and it is something to think about, and it's not to say that phone use can't contribute, because as I said, the reasons that they guessed these were happening were because of some of the postures and forces that we do see when using devices. So the struggle that we have is, this is what we're kind of saying is bad. And we start to see this, almost hunchback posture in the upper body, which definitely is a concern. And then they're saying this is good. I will argue the bottom slides are not good enough. And my slides are not working. There we go. Simply because, yes, you can start to see that we do have some improvement, but from someone who has experienced at times quite severe, tech neck issues, even this slight head tilt would be enough to set me off. I know, I get that it's not as bad as the top one, but it's worse that it's not worse. It's bad in that it still causes me all the same aggravation. And as you can see, we've now taken a neutral shoulder and added an awkward shoulder. We've got awkward wrist postures. We've got, this one on the couch has still got that's definitely a high degree of flexion to look down. So as long as we're holding the device, I'm going to suggest we're going to struggle with getting good results as far as reducing pain. So when you're thinking about that, and you're thinking about the jobs you have, whether they're administrative in nature, and we're looking at things like calculators and paperwork and document holders, monitor position, or whether we're in industry and maybe we're looking at, assembly or inspection work, even when we start to see kind of, if we already have the tech neck happening with our employees, even a small degree can still kind of exacerbate that discomfort. And we may be adjusting by causing other awkward postures in other parts of the body. So we need to kind of keep that in mind. So it becomes a problem. It becomes a significant problem for those of us that have to mitigate and kind of problem solve for our employees' discomforts and ailments. So we have a significant number of staff that we are providing cell phones to. There is an expectation, at least in North America, for a lot of companies that we've given you a cell phone, you are available almost 24/7. And so there's really not a cutoff time where we can say, okay, well, I'm going to give my body a break. Nope, we will continue to get calls, we will continue to get text messages and emails through work, which are work related. And so that becomes problem number one, because that has become the expectation in the industry that if we've provided you with a phone, you are reachable. Unless you're on vacation and you've kind of checked out, but on the day-to-day, you are reachable. So that may be something that we have to look at. We have using mobile devices outside of our job duties. So as I said, all of the social media, the reading, the gaming, anything that you do on your devices, all of that kind of comes into added time. And as our statistics are showing, that's 3 to 4 hours. And I, again, would argue since March, that's probably gone up by at least an hour. And we have workplaces moving towards kind of more digital paperless systems. So we're trying to use tablets more. We're trying to get them kind of more integrated. It allows us to be more productive. I, for one, have been trying for years to kind of adapt some of our data entry templates so that I don't have to write them. I could put them into a device and kind of save time, become more efficient. And I can tell you that holding a device and trying to enter in, very, very hard on the body. The weight of the device becomes critical. I will say I used to use an iPad. The weight of that, now granted it was this was years ago, so it was one of the older iPads, so they may be later now. But I ended up switching to more of a Samsung because it was 1.2 pounds lighter, which was significant for me. At the end of the day, we're seeing these injuries creeping into the workplace. We're having people come to us and say, I'm in pain, and not just a little bit of pain. I'm in crazy amounts of pain. And we're having to try and figure out what to do. And when 3 to 4 hours a day is spent doing non-work, kind of non-voice related activities on your devices, it definitely is a struggle. So one of the things that we kind of should check first, and this is something I, again, encourage you all to do, is because of not just devices, this has been quite the kind of systematic thing. We don't have great posture as a society, you know, where we're not walking around with teacups and books on our heads and you know, waving like the king and queen. But so we often have almost, I don't want to say naturally because it's not natural, but this forward kind of tilt or hunch to our upper back that already starts to pivot those ears forward and does not have them kind of aligned with our spinal cord. So that's what we have first. Now with the whole tech and device situation and this becoming more exasperated, the postures have also become more extreme. So do the test, kind of stand up against a wall, just align yourself with your pelvis and your shoulder blades should touch the wall, and don't try and touch your bed, just see. And take a ruler and just kind of see how far away from neutral you are. A lot of people think they have really good posture and they may argue with you that, no, I'm doing good. I use this, I use that. But at the end of the day, if we're seeing that this wall test is pushing our head back because this has become kind of the new normal for our body, then we may be at a higher risk because of those shear forces and compressive forces that we talked about earlier. So if your head does not naturally touch the wall, then we know we're starting to see some pull and some stretch in the neck and back muscles that are kind of pulling us out of alignment. And the more we kind of adopt those postures, the more stress and strain is going to pull us in that direction. It's not going to pull us back. So not sure this slide is in the right place. I kept moving it around. I think it's an important slide, so we're just going to talk about it right now, and we may reference it again later. As we go through trying to problem solve, trying to work with our employees that have kind of tech neck issues, we will at some point need to come back to the conversation of device usage. There is a way that people can monitor this. So you can, using your device, kind of go into your settings and you can monitor and set how much time you're using on your devices. There are apps you can download that says, you can set how much time per hour or how much time per day that you're going to allow yourself on your devices. And these may be strategies that, although challenging to employ, may be necessary if we're going to try and kind of get a return to work situation or a proactive stance on this injury. Kind of, we're going to need to look in this direction, because people need to be accountable for the time that we're using. So we want to start to see that we have as minimal amount of use as possible, and we're not seeing this 3, 4, 5, 8 hours of tech time on here. So this is something, as I said, could be an app you download. It could be something you go into your settings just to see. The app would offer an alarm or, notification to tell you your time, but your settings is nothing they have to download, and it could be something that you set up. If you are providing a phone, I know my husband, for instance, he's provided a phone. However, he's not allowed uploading any apps to his phone. He has to go through IT, and then they kind of allow him access, and then he can upload the app. It's a bit of a rigmarole. But this may be something that, from a corporate standpoint, you may want to put some kind of monitoring tech app or notification app on phones and provide that as a proactive measure to your employees and say, look, on your phones is this app. We ask that you use it. We ask that, you try and limit or be aware of the time that you're using on your phone. 1 or 2 times of, long periods of time on your devices is not going to cause tech neck. This is a musculoskeletal disorder. It is chronic in nature. It is going to take months to incur. Every time I try to tuck my slides, I keep having to hit them twice. Okay, so come with some of your workplace solutions that can help. So we will often get into kind of debates, shall we say, with some of the people that we do office assessments with, but there is a feeling out there that this kind of posture on the left is the best posture, the most ergonomic posture. And people that are saying, oh, I don't use my backrest because I have really good posture and I sit very upright, and I look at them and they do. However, it still doesn't save them from my counter argument, which is actually no, an upright posture like this is actually not the best ergonomic posture. So first off, it actually stems in the lower back. This posture puts a lot of pressure on the lower lumbar curve of our spine. It pops it out, and all of these vertebrae kind of in the blue are going to adjust, and even some of the ones maybe even in the green are going to start to pivot and move and flatten out, and we don't want that. Now, the other reason why this posture becomes a problem is because once fatigue sits in, and I can guarantee you everyone on this webinar is probably subject to this at some point in time, you will start to curve forward. So your upper spine will start to hunch forward, and you'll start to see that kind of turtle posture really coming into play. When you put a recline on your chair, such as the position on the left, or sorry, on the right, first off, that reestablishes the lower lumbar in your back, so improving that spinal cord position. But now, as long as our monitor is within a good viewing distance, this neck posture, it becomes really hard because we're now having to kind of go work on different levers to come forward and down and back. So this posture actually puts us in a better neck position as well for sustaining neutral neck positions. So if we're looking at the left, this looks maybe better, looks more ergonomic, but not only is there immediate issues with the lumbar back, but there is definite, imminent issues with the neck. With the one on the left, on the right, I cannot get my left and right today, we start to see total improvement in the lower spine, and over prolonged use, better neck postures overall. So how do we position our monitor and make sure? First off, you want to almost position your monitor to the point where it almost feels too close, is really where I would recommend. From someone who has the neck issues, I really don't want it to be comfortable for me to come forward. So I almost push it a little bit to the other way. The guideline, the CSA guideline suggests an arm's length. So an arm's length will allow you to sustain that for 8 hours, to be able to kind of visually see from a fatigue standpoint for 8 hours. As I said, I probably put mine at wrist. I kind of chop my hand off and I move my monitor forward a bit forward so that I stay back longer. And then the height should be the top of the monitor is in line with your eye height. I will show you some pictures later, and you will see I actually have my devices slightly higher. And most of that is so that when I get to the bottom of my device, I'm not in any neck flexion. So because I would rather extend up slightly to counter all the mess I've made in my neck from looking down, I move it slightly forward. I'm not saying that's the thing to do. It is a thing that gives me relief, though. When we look at solutions, try and take people away, get them mobility back in. People have trouble having bad neck postures when they're in movement. Your body naturally wants to align itself because that's how it's going to be able to move better. And so we start to see, if you start taking mobility into the work or tasks that people are doing, then not only are they not able to use their handheld devices or be at their computer, but we're also looking to have kind of better postures overall. So our guideline is kind of 10 minutes per hour is recommended on a device or handheld device, and we should have 5 to 10 minutes every hour in a non-seated position when we're at the computer. So 10 minutes is kind of a good number to keep in your head. When we're looking at how do we use our device with neutral postures, so when we're trying to give our workers suggestions and tips on how they can kind of improve their posture, this is what I would say. If you know without a shadow of a doubt, we're talking, you know, a couple minutes, then these postures are great. So you can see here, this is this one on the left. I got my left and right this time. This one on the left with her elbows, this is what I will often do. So although my shoulders are forward, they are supported. So I'm not kind of just holding them in the air. And the postures, you can see the neck has looked really nice and aligned. And then we have the postures along in eye level. Same thing, we have the postures down, but you can see her back is still very, very straight, and that carries through. The key thing here is the support on the forearms. Okay, you're not going to be able to sustain this posture without that support. So try and think of, you know, even if you're looking at maybe in a plant and you have forward postures, whether it be on a device or whether it be for their tasks, if we're asking this, having kind of the upper body supported will likely allow the spinal column to stay straighter longer, and we're going to be able to sustain this posture for a bit longer than we would otherwise. And then we have another one here where whether it be a couch or chair, and obviously she's sitting on the floor, but again, we're supporting it back going the other way. You'll notice that that slight recline is happening here so that we're actually keeping the neck back further rather than forward. The idea is we're trying to keep it as close to in line with our eyes and using our arms as our support so that we're not having some of those compressive and shearing forces happening along the spine. So this is me. These are some of the solutions that I have used, and it was really quite hard when you go through, and these are just from Amazon, they're nothing special, but when we kind of go through, what are we looking at here? You know, this one on the left, they showed it mostly on couches. It was too low. It was never going to allow me to read and be functional on a couch because I just would sit too high. However, you know, in the situation, and yes, I will argue that my neck isn't perfect, but it is supported, which means I'm not sustaining that counterbalance. My pillows are doing it for me. And I kind of have it so that, as I said, I've got it angled so that as I'm looking, the bottoms, I'm not having to tuck my chin in too much and get that neck pinching happening. So kind of looking at some of these type of devices to keep your devices up. This one, because I was higher, I really wanted the more mobility. So this attaches to basically any flat surface, and actually in vertical surfaces, I've seen it attached to the arms of tables and whatnot. But I'm able to spin this phone or tablet, and I'm able to swing it 360 degrees and angle it up and down. So this, I would say, is my most versatile. However, I don't have a clamp or a bedside table that I could use in bed. So this is why I have the two devices in that respect. All right. The other thing to consider, and something that you may need to discuss when you're dealing with people that are complaining of tech neck, is how they sleep. Whether it's tech neck or whether it's just general, you know, this is often a question I ask when I'm doing office assessments predominantly. And that is, you know, I've gone into the office, looking around. Often I'm not the first ergonomist or health and safety specialist to have gone in and adjusted things. So quite often the setup isn't bad. And sometimes it's a struggle to find, you know, well, what is the predominating, you know, hazard here that's causing the discomfort? And if I'm not able to find one, the conversation often will deviate into, well, how are you sleeping? Because it's the only thing we do more than work. And if our postures aren't good when we sleep, then there is opportunity for that muscle strain and discomfort to be incurred. So we start to then see, how are we able to sleep? And for those with tech neck, you know, any kind of bend or movement in the neck can cause extreme discomfort. So now what was and is considered normal for a lot of people, you know, we start to see this lady here at the bottom, that would just kill me. There's no way I could sleep like that. And although I am a side sleeper, this isn't as bad for me, but it definitely would cause me some discomfort over time. This is predominantly how I've learned to sleep, and that is with a bolster kind of under and supporting my neck, but allowing my nothing at all to push on the back of my head where my occipital kind of part of my skull starts to curve out and push my neck forward. My neck gets pushed forward. I'll usually end up having some kind of flare up thereafter. So if you found that you've kind of really worked the devices and the assists at the workplace, you've had the conversation to minimize, what they're doing on their own time, you're tracking their usage, and we're still having issues, it could be that it's their sleeping patterns that are actually causing them some discomfort. My guess is they would probably know this because you can't sleep a full night. There's no way you can get 8 hours of sleep without being woken up before your body is telling you, ow, this hurts, you need to change posture. So they may not necessarily attribute it to anything specific, but they're probably having restless sleeps. So when we're talking about your return to work strategy, there's kind of a couple things that we should look at. There is, first off, look about how you go about your discussion points for non-occupational injuries. When we're talking about devices, even if we provided your phone, we expect you to be available, that's not where we're getting the 3 to 4 hours of non-phone time on our devices. That's obviously more social media driven, more game, more texting, it's longer conversations. So start kind of looking at how you go about addressing your non-occupational injuries from your return to work standpoint, and start kind of from that standpoint and where their responsibility is in this, because it's very, very much a self-driven rehabilitation process. So we do need to discuss those home practices. We do need to discuss what's going, how are they using the phone? What are they using their phone for? Or their devices if they're using devices. Yes, we can make changes at the workplace. We have a little bit more flex and a little bit more authority on how those devices are used in the workplace, but we lose some of that structure as soon as those devices leave the workplace or being picked up from home. So then we have kind of the discussion maybe ahead of time from a corporate standpoint. How involved are you going to be in their rehab? Are we going to provide them with devices or stands or some of the things that we've looked at for home use? I mean, I'm not saying that I think total those two devices end up costing me maybe just over $50, so it was not a huge output of funds. And yes, it's something that people should be able to get themselves, but we don't know what people's economic status is or situation, and maybe they can't or won't. So, and even if we provide them, how are we going to use them? That whole at-home piece really does become challenging. But from a return to work due diligence, if you're providing the devices, we at least can say we are doing everything possible and reasonable kind of for the protection of our workers, even though it's not work related. So again, having the discussion about their sleeping postures and what they're sleeping and how they can change that. So as far as documentation goes, if we're looking for trying to find modified or accommodated work, we need to know that the jobs have majority of neutral posturing. If we don't, then we're just exacerbating the problem and we're not going to have any headway as far as that goes. So looking at those same things that we're talking about, the at-home devices, we may be able to provide those in-house, making sure their ergonomic setup, whether it be, on a plant floor or in the office, is such that forward neck posture is minimized, and we have things like our monitors, our devices, our documents are in the right position so that we're not leaning forward. And determine if you are going to track the usage of your devices, similar to a return to work plan. If you're looking at, okay, if this is how many hours of work you would do as you're returning to work or work hardening, then maybe the same kind of strategy needs to apply for device use. And then we have kind of potentially the allotment of strengthening or stretching time, similar to any kind of injury rehab. Often we'll need to take those time breaks out for those and making sure that that is happening so that they're able to stretch or strengthen their neck muscles, which is very much needed if you've kind of gone that far. So our overall goal as far as how are we going to stop the effects of tech neck really come back into getting out of this turtle hunched kind of craning neck posture that we have on the far left and trying to have more neutral upright postures. That doesn't sound like rocket science, but given that a lot of us kind of were adopting the left side posture to begin with before devices became into our life, it is becoming a little bit more challenging. So definitely we need to kind of keep back straight, trying not to slouch, lean. Really, it becomes a retraining of how you set your body up. And I'm sure everyone has seen, I mean, your social media is driven by so many ads these days. You know, I've seen the little thing that goes on your back and vibrates to remind you to sit up straight. I haven't tried anything like that, but, you know, it might be something along those lines. I've also seen the braces that kind of put you into a better non-slouch posture. But all of those things are all trying to go into improving your posture. And maybe that becomes, if you're finding this has become more of a systemic issue in your workplace, maybe you try to implement some kind of wellness program that really is surrounded around posture development and improving and getting back to a more neutral, natural posture so that we're not starting off behind the 8 ball with a poor posture to begin with. We definitely want to stretch kind of the upper back, the shoulders, and our front back and lateral neck muscles. And then we need to strengthen. So everything that we're doing with our devices really comes down to extreme overstretched muscles at the back. They're just being stretched like an elastic band. So you stretch an elastic band so many times and it no longer really goes back to its original shape or form. And that's kind of what we're having, except that we have these excessive amounts of force at the end of this band. So really they're not able to even function for what we want them to do, which is to stabilize and hold up our head and neck. So we do, again, if you're going to see improvement, posture's part of it, but it's not going to get you 100% where you need to be. There actually needs to be the rehabilitation, the strengthening of those neck postures. So these are a couple that were given to me at one point, kind of the strengthening from a physiotherapist, and they worked the best for me, but there's lots. And at the end of the day, I'm not going to recommend or prescribe any strengthening exercises. That should be part of some kind of physio plan. And then that's something else to consider is if benefits that are being used, that's all kind of going to go into that rehabilitation of this musculoskeletal injury. Okay, and that, I think, is pretty much it for me. I've wrapped it up a little bit quick, so there is an opportunity for you to ask questions if you have any. Our next webinar, which I believe will be with Sarah, is kind of our top equipment picks. So we're kind of taking this in a bit of a different direction, and we played with this title quite a few times, and I just don't think I got the proper one at the end of the day, which I apologize for. But if you go on our website, there'll be a description. But basically, we're kind of talking the difference between remote offices or at-home offices, but those remote offices and our offices, and how maybe, you know, just sending your stuff from the office isn't the right solution. There are certain things that if we were going to pick out of, you know, a distributor catalog and say this is for the office, it may not be the same piece that we would recommend for the home office or the remote office. So it's going to be kind of our top picks of equipment that we would recommend as far as, you know, whether it be we did an assessment and this is our professional recommendation on what we have that's going to fix the problem, or just kind of best products that are tried and true and we keep coming back to again and again. So I think at this stage in where we are in our COVID history, hopefully we're winding down and it is going to be history soon, but we it's kind of something we're thinking might be important, as we're kind of going back and forth with people are coming back to work, but they still may be staying, you know, at home or remotely a bit more. You may find that the equipment that we're looking at does vary a little bit, and what we choose for one situation might be different for the other. So please join Sarah. That'll be July 23rd at 10 a.m., and we would love to have you. And I will stay on for the next little bit. If anyone has any questions, please let me know. Sarah is also on, and so between the two of us, we should be able to answer your questions. If it turns out that we end up getting a lot of questions, I'm not able to answer them in the time we have left, what we will do is we will send out an email with everyone's questions and our responses to them. I hope you're all doing well and staying safe, and yeah, anything we can do to help, please let us know. Take care.